Well, good morning, everyone. We'll start the session on the new features that you've all got now. Been recently rolling out to all sites for the second edition for 2021. I know the numbering sounds a little bit strange, but this is the second major release for the 2021. So let's have a look at the agenda, and I think everyone knows me, so hopefully there's no one I don't know on the call. So a fairly lengthy agenda, but and I won't read through all the particular items here, but these are all the features that many of them are hidden away inside the system. So this session is really intending to bring them to light so that you're aware of them, and certain areas where they need to be turned on for them to be active, then you'll know where to turn them on. So the sessions I'll go through basically just to summarize each of these points, and there are a lot of other features as well. Not sure if anyone's wanted to peruse all the documentation on the new features, but there's a lot of stuff in there. So this is really just calling out some of the main ones and some of the ones I think are most appropriate across the client base. Now, as part of going through all the top 9 new features, we'll then have a quick look at some of the add-on extensions just to help you be aware of what else is out there, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if you wouldn't mind, store up your questions for the end, and you can type them into chat. So as you have questions along the way, just take note of them, and we'll do that as the conclusion of the session. All right, so the first point, and something everyone has seen as the first thing after the upgrade, is the different look and feel within the system. So initially, the most obvious one was that there were colors on the top of the menu items here. So the workflow works a lot better in that it's prompting with all the relevant options available, and the ones that are particularly useful are the ones that are coming up in green. But the most important thing to point out, and I'll point this out as I go through and demo some of the other features, but being able to add your own favorites. And so here's an example where a few things have been starred, and so they will, where relevant, appear alongside the standard workflow. And that's the important thing to realize. Every individual user needs to be able to do this themselves to be most efficiently using the menu. You can, of course, go to the 3 ellipse buttons there, or the ellipse opens up the menu to make everything revealed, but the things that you're doing frequently, make sure that you favorite those so that they form part of the top menu. So another feature is the applying accounts receivable payments on unreleased documents. So it's no longer required that the document is released. You can go through, and I'll go through this particular one in the demo itself. So makes it a bit more interesting when you can see how this works. And I'll just bring up, so here's a list of the available ones. So I'm just opening this up, knowing it's in a balanced status. So that's the important thing here. And then we go to the applications page. So you'll notice that the main difference is that, yes, it's a balanced document, but I can also load the documents, and if there's a payment or a credit memo, in this case there are 2 credit memos, then I can not only load the documents but auto apply it so that I've got the amount paid coming through automatically. So it's assigning that credit note at this time, not at a later time. And so that's particularly useful to do that and then release that particular document. So a small improvement, but something that had been requested along the way. All right, the next one is refunds. And so I'll just bring back the main slide here. Not that one. There we go. So the refunds is also an area where at the time of doing a sales order, we can have a new button down here for the create refund. And so that facilitates just the whole refund and returns process much more simply. So again, I'll just quickly go into this to give you a feel for where it is. Now, both of these options that I've shown you so far, they are available now. So it's not as though you need to turn on that functionality, and some future ones I'll show you will need to be, but here's my sales order list. I'm just looking at the returns area and being able to bring up an existing return. So in this case, the typical example would be, well, we've supplied the wrong goods, and therefore what we need to be able to do is go to the payments tab and create a refund. So there's now a button here. So the point to notice is that it's in the payments area, so you won't necessarily notice that this button is here unless it's made prominent, but then that refund can be entered in. And if I just put in a bank account, then it'll populate and indicate that we're paying that through the bank. So that doesn't necessarily form part of the bank process. We still need to go into the bank to create the refund, but that will then match when we're doing our bank rec. All right. So the next point is the AP batch reference. So no need to give you an example of this, but this is just a payment itself sitting in the remittance area. And so again, it's one of these things that's buried a little bit into the later tabs, but in the remittance, it now has this batch payment number and a hyperlink to it so that it will take you to the batch itself. So where we see a batch of payments where this is one of the many payments that are being made, at least I can see it from this side. Obviously, when I'm in the batch itself, then I can see each individual payment, but that's always been a question of which batch was it actually paid from. All right, now this next feature is a fairly significant new addition, and it does require the feature set to be enabled. So we can see it must be enabled in feature set. So it won't be sitting on your inventory record at the moment as it is in this example, but it will sit and allow you to create different related items for every individual item. And what that really means is that we can have things like cross-sell, upsell, substitute items, and basically any other relationship. So even if it's just other information that needs to be brought to the attention of the person entering a sales order, it's a good way of bringing that attention to the person. So let's just have a look at that within the demo system. So let's just bring up (3357), I think. Here's one I created earlier, which has the result of how the related items appear on a sales order. And I'll just spend a moment to go through and explain how this works. But as I'm entering a new item, so these two new items here will prompt and have a related item logo here and a little the hyperlink shows that it's an upsell item. The second one shows that it's another item. So if I drill into the item, and really that's predominantly all that's required, other than what we might then do from that, but it's really that visual indicator that's there in the first place. If I come down to the related items area, then I can see this is where we set up one or more relationships. And so just to understand where we've got a cross-sell item or an upsell item, so particularly if there's something that is not in stock, well, how do I know what the other related items might be that I can offer to the customer? And if there's something that's a superseded item and I need to substitute it with something else, then that information is particularly useful, just combining the relationships between the different items. So in this example here of the upsell, that might be just that I would rather them push a higher product if possible. And so just having that as a prominent item on the sales order can help doing that. And then, well, anything that doesn't form those top three can be in other, but then we've got these different classifications, and this tag itself is just indicating to the salesperson what the thought process might need to be, whether it's a promotional item or popular. Any of those can be nominated to be visible. So I close this screen again, because that's really all it takes to add or change those particular items. Then when I'm looking at these particular things, I can click on the hyperlink, and then it offers and says, well, in this particular case, I've got 2 on this, and so there's the options there on the upsell. So in this particular case, this other item is only available in the Sydney location. Maybe that's not appropriate, but if it was, then I would be able to select that particular item, add and close, and that will switch those 2 items. And then now I've got the think box there. So it's replaced it. In this instance, this other one, I think, is just an example where it might be the other users bought other products. So here's an HDMI cable that might go with a monitor. And so being able to say, well, yes, in this case, I need 20 meters of that cabling. So they're all 2 meter items or something like that. I don't really know the products, but that will then, if discussed and selected, that would add as an additional line there. So you can see the relationship there is important in being able to switch between different items, particularly when something isn't available in stock, or what other products might be able to be switched in its place. And then when certain items are purchased, what other items might be associated and also sold. So hopefully that's just giving you an appreciation for how that process works, how it visually appears on the screen, so that that can aid the customer service team. There are other things as well, as far as substitution being required. So certain actions can be forced. So if a customer's requesting a particular item but it's been superseded, then certain things can be forced along the way. Right, so just going back to the next item. All right, so this screen is really just, I added this so that we could just see, here's where that related item relationship appears. If anyone wants the slides after this session, then reach out to me and I'm happy to provide them. So the banking process, so that's the next item here, being able to match multiple documents now. So in this example, and I'll bring this up in the live here, but what we now have is a new checkbox that we can assist within the matching process. And there's a thing around GST as well. When we're doing the banking process, it's so much easier having the GST managed for us within the banking. So let me just bring that up and it'll make a bit more sense. So I'll go into the bank process itself, just leave that other order behind. So here we've got a check account that I'm reconciling. So bank feeds might be bringing all this information in. So hopefully everyone's using bank feeds. In this case, I've got a receipt. It has no transaction descriptions, but what I would do in this case is want to match it to customer invoices. And maybe I know who it is, but it relates to the multiple invoices. Now, as soon as I tick this box, if I haven't selected a business account, it does offer all of the accounts, which can be useful if I'm searching for an amount across open invoices. So that's probably the first point, that it's not tied to just having to find which customer it is. You might use this as a means of finding a single invoice. In this instance, I'm just going to select the top customer here, because I know ABC's got a number of invoices that are there. But this now allows me to select and really do the things that I would do if I was in the accounts receivable payments screen anyway. So if I want to be able to do this within the banking. I don't want to have to go to AR to go and create a multi-invoice payment and then come back here to reconcile it. I want to do it all in one. And so being able to select the items, it's still going to show me the unmatched amounts. And in this case, I'm going to put in, perhaps that's just a little bit too much there. So I wanted just to put in a charge as well. So I'll just do that without getting excessive on this, but it looks maybe it hasn't matched exactly, but let's assume that there was just a charge as well, perhaps. This doesn't seem to come up very often, but if there was a fee involved, then that can also be included as part of this. In this case, it doesn't really matter, but that would be the way that this would be able to be unmatched and or reconciled basically to the invoices. So the point is, we've got multiple selection from the banking screen. We've got the ability to add a charge if you needed to, but it's really bringing that function around the multi-invoices into the one area. Now, the second part of the banking improvements is on the disbursement side. I can create, in this case, it's a charge rule that's coming up. So hopefully everyone's got banking rules picking up a lot of regular repeat transactions. That's been around for some time. But being able to have the tax appropriately treated, and in most cases that would be set so that it's including GST on certain merchant fees, and that type of thing is the most common type of thing that we deal with. But the importance is now in the new release, I can now have access to the tax category. So in this instance, I may set this up so that it's defaulting to default including tax, but there's also this feature of being able to go in and address the very precise tax code that it needs to go to. So in this case, I'm just making sure it's set to domestic, but I can now be very specific for tax reporting around certain things. So if it needed to be put to a capital asset class or something like that, then I actually now can do that specifically without having set up an item code or setting up something else that's a standard rule. So in this example, it's showing the tax amounts as well. So previously that was all hidden, even if we had set it up so that it was coming up defaulting in tax, there was no visibility of that until you hit process. So a lot of new fields on the screen, making this all possible. So, and nothing needs to be set up there for that to happen, other than perhaps just making sure that you've got the appropriate tax categories to utilize. Now I'll just make the point, if there is an item code that is used here, then that does make the process easier by setting the various defaults without having to go into those particular screens, and you would just see the tax total appear so that you can confirm it. All right, so that's the banking improvements. And so the managing GST, that's an extra slide that I've just got indicating how that works. So the next feature is a new inquiry screen. And really the purpose of this is to be able to reconcile your purchase accrual. So anything that's been received in that we haven't received the accounts payable bill, then that should be appearing here as something that is reconciled. So being able to have a PO accrual amount that does reconcile back to your GL. Now there's a little bit of work involved in getting to the starting point to see that everything's clear in the GL side, but this should represent information that makes that task easier. So what I mean by that, and maybe I'll just bring this up so that we can see it on screen together. It's a bit nicer when we can see things moving around. So the purchase accrual balance by period is now sitting here in the inquiries area. Let's leave my bank rec where it was. So from here, and this I'll just bring up, I don't have a great example here, but this just makes it a little simpler what's on screen. But this list is giving me those things that are making up my PO accrual. And so if I looked at any one of these examples, and I'll just bring up the purchase order itself, I can access the various documents there through hyperlinks. But the PO provides the PO history, which really just represents, to make this full screen here. So the PO history just shows me that I have actually received this, and there's an AP bill on there. And this is the reconciliation part. In many cases, we haven't received well, we've received the goods in, but we haven't received the bill, or that there's a variance on the bill, and that type of thing just makes this process simpler, being able to find this. So we have areas for unbilled amounts, not received amounts, anything that's on drop ship. So if we've received it in, but we haven't created the invoice for the customer, so for those of you who do drop ships, that should appear in an amount there, and inventory adjustments not released is also there. So it's a management tool. I actually think it's better from a management tool rather than saying, well, this is a means of being able to come back and reconcile to the PO accrual. But if you need any assistance around getting your head around the way that it works, then reach out to us. So that's a brand new screen, and it is available just on the menu. You just need to know that it's there. All right, now I like this one, AP Bill Reclassification. So this is one of my recent favourites because it allows us to change the account and sub-account for released bills. And even though often this would be addressed through GL reclassification, which is helpful, that's more at the GL level though. And so when we see that there's been a miscoding on accounts payable, it's much better to be able to deal with that at the time, or unfortunately it's when it's released that we find that the account's been put to the wrong account or sub-account. Now the point is here, for this to work, and we'll go through an example of this, but the AP preference setting is required to be set, and the user role needs to be a financial supervisor or a project accountant if that's relevant, but most people would need to be financial supervisor, otherwise that won't be available. Now, when it is up and running, you will see a new status here. So for anything that is currently being reclassified, then you would see under reclassified until it was re-released. And the green areas indicate those areas that we can make changes to. So let's take a look at that one. Go into accounts payable. So I think I'll just go into the bills list. I'll go into the bills list really just to see that we've got different statuses on here. It's taking a little while there. This was working fine earlier, so I'll just see what's going on. So I may come back to that one just to see if that's sorted out. As soon as I press refresh, of course, it's come up, but hopefully it's got over whatever little problem it had. So just while I'm waiting for that to come up, I'll just come back to the slide. So let's move forward onto the next one just to talk about it, and we'll come back to the AP bill. So sorry about that. The next feature, and not everyone uses CRM, but those that do, there are opportunities in sales quotes that are significantly changed now. And I'll just talk through this and then we'll have a look within the system. But there's been a bit of work around making the look and feel of the CRM opportunity simpler. So simplifying layout and tab names on that screen. And having a new sales quotes workflow, and it works really well between the process of a sales quote where you're talking to not a customer, but they're a prospect, and various things that might need to go onto that quote that's not a stock item yet. Those types of things are all facilitated through a sales quote as opposed to a sales order quote. But being able to have that linked to a sales opportunity and then progressed to be a sales order is certainly managed a lot better now through the quotes. And then there's improved stages and statuses of opportunities. I guess I could call it states. Those particular and where it's up to have been improved. And then there's a bi-direction sales orders. So it's easier to get around and navigate back to the sales quote. So if you're looking at a sales order, where did it come from? I can see that from the sales order and which quote it links back to. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Hopefully my bills list is recovered. Maybe I've done something bad to it in my testing, but anyway, I can see here there's one bill here under reclassification. I'll leave that for the moment. I'll just pick up another one. Obviously, if it's balanced, I can make a change. So let me just pick this one where it's a released transaction. Actually, even better than that. So you can see here we've got the pay or reclassify bill. This is where I have actually flagged this as a favorite for myself, and I would set other things as favorites as well, of course. But when that's set that way, I can also use the side panel. So a lot of people don't necessarily have side panels set up because it's not necessarily always there unless you've created it. So some people have and some people haven't. So this is in part just an awareness that you can navigate up and down the list and have whatever related information appear on the screen on the right hand side. So it makes it easier, particularly if you're going through multiple records that you need to check. Then it's a nice way of coming in and viewing, in fact, the approval or other aspects that might be required. All that functionality is still available within the slightly smaller drop-down list. But if I needed to reclassify the bill, then I can see it from here. And of course, what I still get is a maximize of the screen anyway. So if I needed to do that, what I'm doing here, I can probably do in a small screen if it's just a matter of changing the account. But this functionality is really just as simple as I need to put it to a different account, or maybe it's just the sub account that I need to reset because it wasn't defined, and it should be the head office in Sydney, and it should be something else, recruitment services. Doesn't really matter. It's more the fact that I can make those changes or even assign it to a project and project task if I needed to, if I've got project related costs in there, but they hadn't been assigned correctly. So it's correcting something that hadn't been allocated correctly, and then I can release it. So whilst it's unreleased, it will sit as that status that we saw before. There's no problem in coming into a particular record, hitting reclassify. If there's no change, I still release it. So having something under reclassification really shouldn't be something that is a problem. I can just hit release, and that would resolve that particular issue too. All right, so I'll get onto the CRM, which is down here on the opportunity screen. And just a reminder, if you do have questions as we're going through, it's always difficult that you can't ask them at the time, but just store them up and put them into chat at the end. So here's my opportunities list. And now this is one where out of the box, the side panel is quite comprehensive too. So we'll see things like quotes and contacts, sales orders. So it's basically quotes, sales orders and invoices are the key ones that are nice to be able to look and review my opportunities. I'm going through, having a look at the status of each one of them. So I can see the status and stage along here. So that's an area where there has been improvement and simplification of those settings. And then from within the sales quotes themselves, so I can see the sales quote on here, but perhaps what I'll do is I'll just open up the opportunity itself, which I could do on the side panel, but it's a bit small, so I'll just do it from here. And I can see that basically the functionality, well, the terminology, I should say, of the tabs has been simplified, so it's not convoluted and it's pretty easy to navigate around. We've got the activities at the starting point just to see where the latest things are up to. The details being the items that have been quoted, and the quote themselves, so being able to have multiple quotes and then ultimately take that quote and create the sales order once it's been accepted by the customer. So, and I won't go through the other things. The improvement is really around some of that quoting workflow as well. So if I'm looking at the right one here, so if I create a quote, even though I've got a quote in here at the moment, I'm just going to create this and it'll set it as the new primary quote. So I can create and review it. So I get the quote screen related back to the opportunity, but it's now sitting as a sales quote. And so all the items come through automatically. I may then need to reassess the pricing, or perhaps it's just a 5% discount to put onto that particular product, or those two to get it over the line. And so once I'm happy with that, then you can see again the workflow being offered at the top here. Perhaps I want to send it, so I can do that if I know that the wording is going to be correct. I could convert it to the order if I then received it back. So maybe I'll just do that, sort of escalating the fact that at this point they've received the quote and said, yes, that's fine. So I can create the sales order and that flows through the system. So, and it looks like I've just got a problem on the batch, on the relationship there on my branches, which is just because I play around with these things a little bit too much, but that would create the sales order into the correct branch. So that in itself, if I go back to the opportunity itself, just by using the pencil there, so we can then see that I've got the latest communication, so where it's been sent out, the email itself is sitting there, got the details, and look, I've got the second quote here that's sitting here with the revised pricing. So I've got that ability to manage the multiple quotes and copy and revise a quote and then flow that through into the sales order area. Now the workflow itself has also been improved, so we spoke about just the different stages and statuses, but the fact that it also just triggers off the menu as well. So obviously we all want the closes one, there's closes lost and other things that you might set as available on the top of the list. You know, create sales order might be something that you want to add and have it appear there. But I'll just click that as close in one. All right, so it's that type of workflow that makes life a little easier than the way it was. The less clicks, the better it is. All right, so back to the slides. So that really wraps up the key functionality within the latest release, and hopefully that's been something that's been a little bit enlightening. It's certainly easier than reading through all the documentation, but just to see where things come out. And ultimately, as I said, some of those areas need to be turned on. So if you've got any trouble seeing certain things that you felt were useful for you, then let me know. Now, the slide in front of us here is really just to talk through some of the extensions. So there are add-on solutions that work with MYOB Advanced, and there's a large number of them, but these are the ones that are popularly being discussed for various purposes. So I'll just quickly talk through each one. So Expense Manager has been, or is often considered both for managing expenses and also accounts payable automation. So it's been in the MYOB community for some time, but as far as being able to do things like, not go forward, things around OCR, so recognition of invoices and automatically creating that transaction for you, that's where it's stepping up from the standard functionality that you get within MYOB Advanced. So it's something that will plug and play with the system. So it does allow multiple managers to review and approve invoices. Not that you can't do that within MYOB Advanced, but it's got a lot of mobility that makes that a very user-friendly thing for a large number of users. So the second one is Shopify, and there's a big commerce connector as well, but Shopify is a common platform used in Australia, and so from an e-commerce integration, it's got particularly good integration. It's been around as a separate third-party integration for quite a number of years, but it's now been created as an out-of-the-box solution. Now, Valexo, a lot of people would have heard now of Valexo being something that I quite like as an Excel reporter, allowing us to bring in and connect Advanced into Excel. And so it's got that very rare ability to be able to put MYOB Advanced formulas into the document, so into a P&L or into a sales report, so we can pull information, and using Smart Refresh we can get information into Excel and utilize that within Excel a lot better than trying to use just standard reporting. And as part of that, it has the ability to distribute reports to multiple stakeholders. So again, Excel is a popular way of being able to send information to people, but it's necessary to not have formulas and things like that in there, so it has an ability to take those out or send it as a PDF if you wanted to. So it has a distribution engine and also just the ability to write back into MYOB Advanced. So for example, if you've got budgeting or if you've got any information that you would normally want to import back into the system, so even if you've got stock information that you currently have or stock prices, so sales price lists, things like that, often we use those in Excel so that we can then use that Excel sheet to push back into Advanced. So really good functionality around that. The next one is the Outlook add-in for Advanced, particularly around CRM, but it's really just storing of any appropriate email that comes into your inbox, or something that you've sent. You can store that within MYOB Advanced against the contact record, so being able to see it against the business account, the contact, and have that visibility. So it's not just in one person's inbox. So there's no additional cost for that add-in, so it's just something to be aware of. And if you think that you might be interested in not having used it before, let me know. And then there's a lot more movement to paperless warehouse. So both within the MYOB Advanced standard inventory system itself, but then recognizing that there's other integrated WMS solutions. So it's important to be able to use barcode and scanning appropriately. So it's a good idea to perhaps just be aware that there are integrated solutions, but just to take you from something that might be paper-based at the moment to something that is more automated within the warehouse. So if any of those topics are of interest, then it's certainly something that I would be interested to talk to you about.